Board of Commissioners. We have 6 meetings this evening. We have the Finance Committee meeting, a Police Committee meeting, Parks and Recreation Committee meeting, a Public Works Committee meeting, a Legal Affairs Committee meeting, and then a special Board of Commissioners meeting. Before we start, I'd like to ask you to please silence your cell phones. If you need assistive listening devices, we have some up here at the front. I still can't say that 6 months into this job. But with that, we start with the Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to recognize its chair, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, President Sinai. Tonight there are 4 items on the Finance Committee agenda. We'll start with the first, which is for the committee to consider awarding a contract for curb, sidewalk, and ramp repair of what is existing sidewalks, ramps, and curbing. Before us is our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Traub, to tell us more.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Tells us a little bit about the perils of predicting costs right now in the current environment. Some contracts we've done recently, we've seen really higher costs, and some contracts recently we've seen costs right around budget. With this, given the materials, staff actually lowered its expected quantities, expecting much higher unit costs. What actually ended up happening is the unit costs actually ended up being very reasonable. So that's why there's the difference in the total bid cost versus the budget. So approximately 50% of the budget. What this means is we might end up, as we go forward, working with the contractor, increase a few additional locations. As Commissioner Zeloff said earlier, this is not about new sidewalks. This is about replacing and repairing sidewalks damaged mostly by shade trees in the right-of-way. So we are happy with the bids, looked at the contractor. We haven't worked with them before, but we see no reason not to recommend award and approval later tonight at the Board of Commissioners meeting. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Eric. And just to clarify, this is a requirements contract that establishes unit pricing. So as you said, we may buy more units because of the pricing being lower than expected.
Yep.
Okay. Do committee members have questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, do any members of the public in the room have any questions or comments on this item? Jody, do we have any questions or comments online?
There is no one online.
That answers that. So I will move that the committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for concrete curbs, sidewalks, and ramps to LB Construction Enterprises, Inc., in accordance with the bids received on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, and the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer, with the approval of the Director of Public Works in the amount of $42,142. Do I have a second? Vice President Gavrin? The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor indicate by raising your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. The second item for the committee to consider is awarding a contract to repair the Williamson Road Colvert. Eric, can you tell us more about that?
Yes, this is an unbudgeted project. I believe the origin of it is a large tree fell down, and when Public Works was cleaning up the tree, it revealed a culvert, and that culvert was not in very good shape, and it really needs immediate work. So in the stormwater CIP project, there is some funds budgeted for unforeseen expenses, but this is something that the township staff and the township engineer feels very much needs to be addressed. Overall, you see the title there is option B. There were actually 2 options in this contract. One was kind of a maybe a more classic kind of dig and replace option on the culvert. This is actually more like a slip lining of the culvert. We talk about that a lot with sewer projects. But the option B is the only one that we got bids on, and was actually the one that was preferred by staff. And the cost is actually within the construction estimate that the township engineer developed, about 8% below the budget. So we do recommend moving forward with this this evening. happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Can you tell us exactly where in Williamson Road this is, or can our Public Works Director do so? Because Williamson Road is near my ward, but I can't figure out where this is.
Just double checking my streets with my former right-of-way coordinator. If you were traveling on Williamson Road and you got to the intersection at Black Rock, coming from the Ford, that direction, going towards your ward, Commissioner, you come to that, you go through the intersection at the stop sign, there's a dip right there. The dip there, under there is the Colvert pipe.
You'll have to try that again. The Ford is not in
No,
Williamson
coming
Road.
from the Ford, you make a left onto Williamson Road. You come to the first intersection at Black Rock Road, the four-way intersection, stop signs. You proceed through the stop sign on Williamson Road, you literally go down into a dip. That dip is where the culvert pipe's located.
Okay. And slip lining was considered, but that's not your,
That's my nighttime job.
That's Commissioner Churchill from Mars.
It was our preferred method. That pipe is very deep. And traditional method would have been dig, which would have been road closures and detours and so forth. Dig on the pipe and replace the pipe. This allows us to put a slip line in the pipe through access through the neighboring property. So that'll solve, detour issues and so forth. There may be a day with some flagging and so forth because we have some tree removal and some other items to do to gain access, but
okay. Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions or comments for either our Chief Financial Officer or our Public Works Director? Seeing none, do any members of the public who are with us tonight have any questions or comments? And Jody, your prior comment about online continues to stand?
That is correct.
Very good. I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for the Williamson Road Culvert General Construction Option B to Mawr Allen Concrete Products, Inc., in accordance with bids received on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, and the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer with the approval of the Director of Public Works and Township Engineer in the total amount of $170,270, including the lump sum bid, contingency items CB1 through CB6, and add alternate item A1. Do I have a second? Vice President Gavin seconds. Are there any further comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, that item passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to the third item on the finance agenda, which is a recommendation to reject the one bid received for improvements to the Bryn Mawr Community Center. Eric, can you tell us more?
Yeah, so back to the first items, the perils of estimating costs in the current environment. This is one where we had an estimated budget of around $170,000, and it came in nearly double of that. So staff looked at this and tried to balance what's the best approach. This is a known bidder who's done a lot of different work in the township and generally performed well and done high quality work. But obviously the cost is prohibitive, so we're trying to kind of balance what's the best approach. But in general, we feel just based on the number of, actually only one bid, and the costs, and the fact that we believe we could also rebid this quickly in the fall, Perhaps maybe it's a slightly better bidding environment in the fall. A lot of general contractors do a lot of school district work in the July-August period when schools are out of session. Maybe it'll be slightly better. So based on all of those factors, we felt that this was the best approach in concert with myself, the Public Works Director, and the Township Manager. Ernie, I don't know if you have anything to add on this item.
No, I think Eric's covered it well. It's well over budget, and we don't seem to, at this point, have Eldernet pressing to get back into the building, so best to try and rebid this.
Okay, thank you both. Do any members of the committee have any questions or comments for Eric or Ernie? Seeing none, do any members of the public have any questions or comments? And no one online, Jody? So I'll then move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners rejection of the bid received for the Bryn Mawr Community Center interior repairs received on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, due to the cost and number of bids received. The project would be rebid later in 2022. Do I have a second? Vice President Gavin seconds. All those in favor, so indicate by raising your hand. Thank you. Any objections, any abstentions? Seeing none?
One abstention.
One abstention. Madam Secretary, with an abstention, that still is unanimous, I believe. Correct. Thank you. Okay, fourth and final item for the Finance Committee this evening is for us to consider awarding a contract for architectural and engineering services for the proposed new Ardmore Avenue Community Center and renovations to the existing Palm Center. Eric, can you tell us more?
Yeah, I'm just going to start off really quickly and then turn it over to Ms. Heller. So the one thing I want the board to be aware of, first off on this, is architectural and engineering services are professional services. So under the First Class Township Code, there is no requirement for public bidding because we're bringing you something forward in a recommendation that does not come as a result of a public bidding process, but that is completely okay with services such as that, legal, engineering, et cetera. The township manager clarified an email, I think, to the board yesterday. The board does not actually need to discuss the LEED issues. The issue briefing highlights a lot of the relevant matters and background to this project. And with that, I'm just going to pass it along to Donna to discuss the project, GKO, and next steps.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Commissioners. We're looking to progress with this, the inevitable reconstruction of the community center and renovations to the Palm. The next steps would be the schematic design documents, construction documents, as well as bid documents and construction oversight. This is an all-inclusive price that the architect is offering us. During the schematic design process, they will take in consideration the previously collected public comment as well as collect additional public comment, do some actual boring and seeing what is actually on the site, how well it's drains, what actually will fit there. And so we will get a better picture of what the building would be as far as the Ardmore Avenue Community Center as well as the Palm. And collect additional community input from that. I've also met with Building and Planning in regards to the Ardmore Master Plan, so we're going to work in lockstep with them as well on that. And then the design document phase is really the phase that nails everything down. That's the final bite at the apple before we go to construction documents, which are the what is going to be built. So we do have two steps in the front of this process that would allow for additional input and kind of seeing what is available. During the process, we also will have discussions as far as what level of green we are looking to seek, or whether we want to get certified, those types of things along the way. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Donna. I'd also now like to call on our township manager to clarify the point in regard to LEED certification. As Eric referred to an email, but that was not an email that went to all board members, just to some.
No, I think I copied it to everybody.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
But the point was, we don't need to make a determination on paying to get LEED certification at this point. We need to get into the design. We reviewed the feasibility study with GKO Architects last month, and the board was happy with the feasibility plan. As we get into the design, they have made the commitment to you last month, and staff would also reinforce that commitment. We will, of course, investigate any and all, energy savings, green infrastructure opportunities that we have in this process. And as we do that, then we'll be able to decide whether we need to pay extra money to go after LEED certification or just design to LEED standards and perhaps choose not to go after the certification itself. Donna said, for example, we may want to consider a geothermal HVAC system for this new structure. But before we can determine that, we've got to go do borings and find out what's under the ground. So it's just too early to make that decision. So it's our recommendation that you proceed and award the base bid, and then we'll get into design and begin making decisions, which we will bring back to this board, as they come up.
Thank you very much, Ernie. Do committee members have questions for either Ernie, Donna, or Eric? Seeing no questions, do any members of the public have any questions or comments? Please come forward to either microphone and identify yourself.
Hello, Adrian Seltzer, Wynwood. I was going through stuff online on the Lower Merion website with regards to this project. I found that in 2014, which is the earliest I can find because you don't have anything on the website before that, there was a complete needs assessment done. In 2016, a space needs study was done, and Kimmel Bogret Architects did that, so that was money spent there. In 2021, you did a feasibility study. That came back with a plan that we saw again last month. That was virtually the same, with none of the community comments being put into that. And now we're spending money for architectural and engineering services. And my question is, are we really doing this? I mean, we keep starting and stopping and starting and stopping. It's been 7 years just that I could find. And I understand what Donna said about, the process. But my point is there really going to be community comments? Because on the one that was done in 2016, they said that everybody that was there that reviewed the plan from the public was very fine with it. But then all of a sudden, there was something about crossing the street was too much, because I guess we don't do crosswalks here in Lower Merion. I'm not sure. But I just want to make sure that this is actually getting done. And it's not just a start and stop and a start and stop again. And please don't ignore my comments like you have in the past. It's very rude. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Seltzer. Any other members of the public with any questions or comments? This would be the time for committee members to respond to public comment, and I will do so. Ms. Seltzer, in 2014, I guess it was, there was a feasibility study. We didn't like it. It was rejected. It called for a combination building of the community center and the Palm on one side of the street. It called for, it required crossing the street.
The parking was on the other side.
And that's right, I was right. The parking was on the other side of the street with no crosswalk, considered, proposed, envisioned, engineered, and it was rejected. It was poorly done. So the public process which by definition is slow, is now very different than it was in 2014, because you've been here in our meetings, and this committee and this board has been very supportive of the new feasibility study, which renovates the Palm, keeps it where it is with its parking, builds a brand-new Ardmore Avenue Community Center with parking, and so we're now at a place that makes sense. And yes, this is a step in a multi-step process to keep this moving forward. The public process is slow, but it is moving forward. Anybody else with any questions or comments? President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Zoloff. So before I respond, I would like to give Manager McNeely a chance to address at what stage community comments enter this design, right? Because we've had a feasibility study, but we haven't been doing design yet. So maybe you could address that.
Yes, I mean, you're right. We've already gone through a feasibility study where there was a working group that solicited public input throughout the process of the feasibility study. This board has had several meetings now with 2 presentations of the feasibility study to the board at public meetings. But now, if you actually authorize this contract to begin, GKO will begin working with staff to actually design the facility. And as Donna said a little bit ago, we will solicit additional input as we go through the design process. There's steps in a design process, so you'll see a schematic design at some point that will refine what was shown in the feasibility study, and there will be opportunity for public comment as we go through these steps. So there's additional opportunities coming, and there has already been substantial opportunities for public input into this project.
And just to be clear, because I'm looking at the issues memo that we have, so the first stage, which is schematic design, says that's when the design team begins to describe architectural and tectonic elements of the project design, along with collecting and evaluating community input, presumably incorporating the input that they already have. The team takes the input, programming, and concept design and translates it into an implementable architectural and spatial design. Is that the stage at which we will start to see some of this come to fruition?
You'll start to see some actual drawings that folks can comment on and building layouts that folks can comment on.
Okay, thank you, Manager McNeely. In terms of whether this project is moving forward, I think any regular attendee of these meetings knows that every time it comes up, we all express, tremendous support for this project. We're all excited by this project. And we all say we wish it could go faster, but there's a reason that large, expensive public projects happen in public at a pace that is set by these series of public meetings. You have to bring these elements forward. You have to move the stages along. I would say this, and I'll let my Commissioner Bernheim wants to add, because it really got underway under his watch. This board has spent a tremendous time working on this. And we would not be doing that if we did not want it to move forward, right? It just wouldn't be up here and we wouldn't be talking about it. We're talking about it a ton because we want it to move forward. We have budgeted for it, right, to move it forward. We are going to vote tonight on whether to move it forward. This is a project that is getting done, but this is what it looks like when projects get done in municipalities that are expensive and require a lot of design and thought. We do not do them hastily. We cannot do them hastily. So this is what it looks like. And so hopefully anyone who's listening to this recognizes that this is what it looks like when this board takes a project seriously.
Thank you, President Sinai. Commissioner Bernheim?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zoloff, and I appreciate your comment, Manager McNeely and President Sinai. I think you hit all the salient points extraordinarily well, so I'm not going to repeat any of them. But there's one aspect of the comment that was made that I feel compelled to address. Whether somebody appears before us on one and only one occasion, or somebody appears before us every time we're here on multiple occasions, we listen very carefully to what they have to say. And not only we listen to it, we process it. We don't ignore anybody, ever. That's just not the makeup of my colleagues that are on this board, or I can say for the 12 or whatever years I've been sitting here that I've ever seen as the protocol. So I just want to make sure that it's very, very clear that whoever comes to speak to us, we listen carefully to what's stated and we weigh it accordingly. We have always done that. We will always do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Other committee members with questions or comments? Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank my colleagues for their comments, and this is very similar to what you have both expressed in terms of how we are listening to the community. I, along with a couple of other commissioners, sat on a feasibility study committee led by our Parks and Rec staff with about 15 people from the community on any one call. These are neighbors from the Ardmore neighborhood who know their particular part of our township better than anybody. And they were taken so seriously. I listened with my own ears, us absorbing and readjusting our thought process directly related to their feedback. Every meeting that was the case. It was incredibly collaborative. So I would like to just dispel any myth that we misheard or underheard what members of the community really advocated for in the first stage of the AARP rebuilding. And it's a project, although they're excited, we're certainly excited to support it. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Other committee members with questions or comments? Okay. Very good. We listen to public comment, as Commissioner Bernheim was very clear to point out. So I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for architectural and engineering services and cost reimbursements for the Ardmore Avenue Community Center and the Palm to GKO Architects in the amount of $840,973 with the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer and the approval of the Director of Parks and Recreation. Do I have a second? Commissioner O'Neill. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously. So we're 4 for 4 on items tonight with the Finance Committee agenda, and that concludes our business. Thank you, President Sinai.
And thank you very much, Commissioner Zelloff. With that, we turn to the Police Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have one item on the Police Committee agenda tonight, and that has to do with the authorization on Wyndon Avenue in Ward 11. We have with us our Director of Parking Services, Jerry Adams, who will give us a brief presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, Commissioners. Manager McNeely. Tonight I bring to you hopefully something that will not take up very much of your time. We have a road in the Bryn Mawr area close to the Shipley School. The residents and the institutions on this stretch of Wyndon Avenue have requested that the existing 4-hour parking be bumped to an 8-hour parking zone between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. This will allow students to park on Wyndon Avenue. The reason that myself and the police traffic safety unit do approve or recommend this for approval is primarily because there is minimal residential in this area. It's primary institutional. So having kids park there for the entire day does not really impact the residents per se. Our understanding based on the petition, all the abutting property owners of this section of Wyndon Avenue have approved of this request. So we basically leave it to the commissioners to decide. It is up to the commissioners, obviously, to change any parking regulations. This will minimize the amount of car jockeying that happens in a lot of the school areas. Some areas where it doesn't seem necessary, like this stretch of Wyndon Avenue, where it's primarily institutional and minimal residential. It's a good thing to create fewer cars moving around the road in the midday hours, trying to find new parking spaces because of the regulations. There are areas that are heavy residential where you kind of have to have that happen to provide an opportunity for the residents to still park on the street. This is not an area where that has been an issue. So again, Parking Services as well as Traffic Safety Unit recommend this for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I take it from the briefing memo that with a proposed change, that would prohibit overnight parking, but eliminate the jockeying you just talked about during the 8-hour period, so. Thank you. Any commissioner comments or questions? Commissioner O'Neill?
Oh, thank you. And thank you for the overview. This section of the Shipley School falls within Ward 11, and I was very pleased to be a part of the initial meetings when we were struggling with a solution here, given the fact that you have, so as you described, you know, you have a series of students coming midday, it gets very congested, it's just not a safe condition. So that we were able to mobilize and get 100% signatures within, I think, 3 or 4 days was really remarkable.
Correct.
And it goes to show the level of community support there is for this ordinance change. So I would be grateful for your support. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Any other commissioner comments or questions? Commissioner Zeloff?
Commissioner McComb, I would just observe that we should look to this as a model for parking in neighborhoods near schools. This is making it less restrictive, and so we always are going in the opposite direction. So congratulations to Commissioner O'Neill and all the neighbors for this initiative.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Those are good comments. Do we have any public comment? Madam Secretary, do we have anybody online?
No one is online.
Okay, seeing none, I'll put this into a motion that we consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Secretary to advertise notice of intent to adopt an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 145 thereof, entitled Vehicles and Traffic, Article 15, Schedules, Section 145-118, Schedule 18, Parking Time Limited, by adding an 8-hour, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. except Saturday and Sunday parking limitation on the north side of Wyndon Avenue from North Marion Avenue to North Roberts Road. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise their hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, passes unanimously, and that concludes the business of the Police Committee.
Thank you, Mr. McComb. I would just like to point out that we're requesting that this item go onto the special board meeting agenda so that the process can occur before school starts.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McComb. So I guess with that, we turn to the Parks and Recreation Committee. I recognize its Vice Chair, Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, President Sinai, and good evening, Ms. Heller. Once again, this evening we have one agenda item on the Parks and Rec Committee, and that is with respect to the naming of a soccer field in South Ardmore Park in honor of Robert L. Davidson. And this is one of the another good thing we get to do as a Board of Commissioners is we get to name recreational facilities. So this is a good one, and we'd love to hear more about it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Mr. Davidson, who I actually knew personally, he was the soccer league coordinator for the township when I first came here, and an incredible man, just selfless, just provided mentorship to a generation of Lower Merion residents. From his family and friends, I actually learned a lot more about him. He gave selflessly to Special Olympics, started the Lower Merion Soccer Alumni Association, was its first president. The Alumni Association actually is supporting this financially to actually implement the memorial if it is approved. They will pay for the expense of acquiring whatever it is, plaque, and the mounting system for it. So happy to answer any questions you have, but I do know there's a couple family members and friends that are here to speak to the dedication.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Heller. Do any committee members have questions or comments for Ms. Heller? Seeing Sean? Yeah, oh, yes. In my head, I was thinking the other Sean. I'm so sorry. Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Davidson's family for the opportunity to honor him. He sounds like a wonderful person. This is in my ward, and I'm very happy that we have the opportunity to honor his great service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments from the public or family members? please.
Good evening. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my brother Bob. I will be brief. I would really second all that was said. I'm his younger brother, Steve. For 1 year, I was his teammate on the Lower Merion varsity soccer team and his best friend for life. I'm joined by two of his former players. They head up the Lower Merion Soccer Alumni Association now, Jimmy Van Duzen and Brian Vernick. As you know, we're here to ask this body to strongly consider naming the soccer field in South Ardmore in his honor. He was Lower Merion through and through, as was said. First as a 3-year varsity starter, all scholastic, all league in his junior and senior year. And then for 36 years, he taught physical education at Merion Elementary School and spent 23 years as either the assistant varsity coach or varsity coach at the high school level. But it was on South Ardmore Field where he logged thousands of hours as a volunteer at Parks and Rec, as an employee of Parks and Rec in the summer, and a volunteer and mentor where he began his extensive township soccer program, as was said. Summer clinics, high school and open division soccer leagues in the evening in the summer, and winter indoor soccer leagues. At Merion Elementary, his passion was teaching the benefit of health and wellness to an entire generation of Lower Merion students. His annual Junior Olympics was regarded as the gold standard, teaching children skills that went way beyond the events he so carefully choreographed on the fields at Merion. Both there and in his summer soccer clinics, he taught his pupils and players how to prepare, how to handle success and failure, and how to demonstrate compassion for others. His commitment to Lower Merion soccer transcended his sideline duties. He founded and served as the president of the Alumni Association, setting up a website to keep in touch with former players, updating them about the current team, and keeping them connected to the Lower Merion School District and the Lower Merion community at large. One of those former players is Brian Vernick, who I'd like to introduce now.
Thank you, Steve. Members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a proud member of Lower Merion's 1989 graduating class, and I am honored to have been coached to Central League, District 1, and PIAA state champion soccer wins by Bob Davidson. Coach Davidson was a beloved physical education teacher at Merion Elementary for 36 years, as well as the Lower Merion High School boys soccer coach for over 23 years. His commitment to improving the lives of our students and young community members remained strong and unwavering during his educational career. The intrinsic qualities of Coach Davidson have formed the basis of my coaching personality and style. Wanting to keep Coach's legacy alive has led me to volunteer for my children's athletic teams over the past 15 years. In that time, I've always tried to replicate Coach's positive attitude, sportsmanship, and turning the disappointment of losing a game into learning opportunities for my players. He was a trusted advisor, respected and respectful teacher, and his ability to bring out the best in his players seemed effortless. He was inclusive, not exclusive. He taught us the meaning of hard work, gave us his love, and let us know he believed in us. So many of our district students use South Ardmore Park to improve their athletic skills. Let's name a field after Coach Davidson and honor his legacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
In addition, Bob started the Lower Merion Soccer Hall of Fame and was deservedly one of his first inductees. He also helped create and nurture the Steve Fountain Memorial Golf Tournament, which to this day continues to raise money for the children of a former Lower Merion player. In retirement, as was said, he coached Special Olympics, both soccer and basketball, for 10 years. We believe that the naming of the Bob Davidson Memorial Field would be a fitting tribute and an enduring reminder to future Lower Merion residents that how you live your life matters. We earnestly hope that you will approve this proposal, and we stand ready to assist in any way we can to make that happen, including producing a true show of support from alumni, former students, and community members. He's been gone 5 years this June, and this would be an appropriate time to honor him. In keeping with your guidelines, we are interested in naming the field in his memory with a plaque or a marker, a bench, some landscaping, all of which is said would be underwritten by the Lower Merion Soccer Alumni Association. We sincerely appreciate your time and look forward to hearing from you regarding appropriate next steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for your comments. So I think with those incredible comments, I will make a motion for us to consider for recommendations, a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, the naming of the upper soccer field at South Ardmore Park in honor of Robert L. Davidson. May I have a second? Thank you. Commissioner Kramer. All those in favor, please signify and raise your hands. Great, thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. So thank you very much for this engagement, and we look forward to working with you on it. Thank you. And with that, this concludes the business of the Parks and Rec Committee.
Thank you so much, Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you.
With that, we turn to the Public Works Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner McKeon.
Thank you, President Sinai. There's just one item on the Public Works Committee agenda this evening. It is a resolution authorizing the steps necessary to vacate Old Monk Road. This will also go on the Special Board of Commissioners later tonight if it is approved. To get things started, I will make a motion. I will move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution to declare the intent to discontinue, abandon, and vacate Old Monk Road from its intersection with Monk Road to the end of the cul-de-sac, a distance of approximately 395 feet, and authorize the actions necessary to accomplish this, including the scheduling of a public hearing on the matter. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes, with the second. Is this part of your jogging network? Or? No. And I'll recognize...
If I wear my good outfit.
Yeah. With that, I'll recognize our Director, Mr. McElhenney, for a presentation on the application.
It's, Commissioner McKeon has really touched on it. It's a small section of road. Was brought to us by the residents who are adjacent to it, that they would like to convert the area in question into a butterfly garden. The road serves no purpose at this time to the township. We are the keepers of the chain, and unlocking and locking it for the access of the residents to their properties to keep individuals from dumping and illicit behavior at the end of the cul-de-sac. But they would like to take the area back. It serves no purpose. It gives no access to any utilities or anything of that nature. If road was needed to continue, it leads to nowhere. There would be nowhere that it would go to. So this is the recommendation is for the vacation of it. And the change in use would probably, as you know, would be welcomed by the neighbors.
Thank you. And this is not township property, right? This is private property. We just have a right-of-way over it.
It was an actual road that has not been utilized and actually has been chained off for many years because it serves no purpose other than access to the 2 or 3 adjacent properties to their side yards.
Okay, got it. Thank you. With that, any other Commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Grimes.
Right. Thank you, Chairman McKeon. So, yes, I'd just like to endorse this, just to add what Mr. McElhenney said. Over the course of time that I've been working with residents there, there's been, not lately, but occasional short dumping on this property. As Paul said, there is a chain, but somehow the chain has disappeared at various points over the years, and people have gotten into it. So I see this in a way of relieving the township of a minor obligation to maintain this short stretch. In addition, as Paul said, there's the immediately adjacent residents, of which there are 3 properties, have already expressed enthusiasm for making this nice, not necessarily publicly accessible, that would be up to them, but nice. And this, to be clear, this is in case anyone is watching, any residents, this is the beginning of a process, and there will be a public hearing. I am certainly not aware of anyone other than the immediate adjacent residents who have opinions about this, but certainly if they do, there will be a public hearing scheduled, and we'll be able to hear from residents. So having said that, for tonight's purposes, I hope everyone will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. I'm learning a lot about what the right-of-way is versus township property this evening, so I'm going to have a few remedial questions. So this is right-of-way. It's private property that we have put a road on. Is that correct?
Correct.
So what could we put on the right-of-way? Road, sidewalk? Trees?
Usually a right-of-way is for the public benefit. And when I say public benefit, that's for the utilities, that's for the municipalities to be able to install such things as telephone poles, gas lines, those type of items. With no houses down that road, no need for PICO to come through, there's no need for a right-of-way. If those property owners at some point wish to have gas installed, they would go through their properties. The street is has full electric throughout the entire, because Monk Road itself that this connects to is a cul-de-sac, and that is fully powered, it's fully supplied, and so forth. So there would be no need for us to ever, or any utility, to have a need to go through there.
Could we put a park on the right-of-way?
The question is, do you, as the Board of Commissioners, wish to pursue an additional a pocket park in the area that's located in? That's not something I wouldn't be able to.
I guess it's a legal question. Could the township put a park on the right-of-way?
I would have to suggest, I haven't seen the original ordinance ordaining the road, but I suspect the original ordinance specified the public purpose for the road, for the right-of-way was a road. And therefore, no, you could not change that public purpose without going through another process.
All right, then. I think a butterfly garden is a great idea. I support this. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. That's something
Thank
to
you.
add.
I just wonder, because maybe great minds think alike. I actually thought about that, and Commissioner Courtney as well. I think in this particular situation, although again, certainly this is good, we're going to have a public hearing. This particular road is a kind of a stub of a road, for lack of a better way to put it. It's not very large, and there would be parking challenges at that location. But having said that, and I frankly have not heard of a lot of energy for an additional park in that area, but having said that, if there's members of the public who want to comment, they'll have an opportunity. But yeah, I had thought of that myself before tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners with questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment in the room? Yeah, please come forward. I think you need to use that one.
Yeah, it's John Willis in Ardmore. Who holds title to this new, to this old Monk Road once it's vacated?
Generally, when a road is vacated, it goes to in equal proportions to the property owners on either side from whom it was originally acquired. So the properties on either side were probably equally involved in when the road was originally created. So the property essentially goes back to the property owners on either side.
Okay, so Lower Merion Township...
Mr. Willis, we're not going to have a back and forth, so if you do have some questions, just lay them all out now.
I'm sorry, what?
We won't have, you don't have a back and forth. You have your time to talk for public comment. So if you have 2 questions or 1 question or 4 or whatever you had, I just ask that you please get them all out now, and then the board will respond.
Okay. I just think I have one more question.
Okay.
The other question is, I'm sorry, sort of broke my chain of thought there.
Yeah.
Who's responsible
I'm sorry.
Who's responsible for maintaining the vacated road?
That, the property owners who end up owning the road.
Okay, but I didn't know, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. Any other public comment in the room? Seeing none, and Jody, no public comment online?
There's no one online.
Okay.
Oh, we have one person online. Need to repeat that because they just came on. If they want to make any public comment.
Okay.
That's one of the property owners.
So if there's anyone online who wants to make public comment, please raise your hand or let us know. No? Okay, all right, with that, sorry, Commissioner Kramer.
I do have one question. Did we pay for this right-of-way when we acquired the property from the property owners for the right-of-way for the road?
You'd have to research very old records likely to determine whether the township originally paid anything for the right-of-way. We don't hold it with a deed. The deeds of the property owners on either side of it will describe that as a right-of-way across their property. The township does not have a deed to the property. We have a right-of-way. In all likelihood, years and years ago, without having researched it, the township laid out a series of roads and probably did not pay back in those days for the right-of-way.
Well, if we have to pay to acquire a right-of-way now, shouldn't there be some compensation coming back from the property owners for giving up our right-of-way? It's just a question.
You acquired the right-of-way because you determined you had a public purpose for it. What you're now saying is you no longer have a public purpose for it, therefore you're giving up your right to use it. I don't know. Solicitor, if you have any additional legal advice?
Typically, when you vacate a road, you don't get compensated for it from the property owner. You're basically giving up your public right to it and saying property owners that it generally goes to the center line of the road. So the property owner on one side gets to the center, on the other side gets to the center, and it just goes back to the property owner. And they maintain it from that point forward.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Okay, that'll call it to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And with that, President Sinai, that concludes the business of the Public Works Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McKeon. The remaining committee meeting for this evening is the Legal Affairs Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, President Sinai. We actually have 2 items on the Legal Affairs Committee agenda this evening, both of which, if approved, will end up on our special Board of Commissioners meeting. The first concerns a matter of authorization to execute the Calvary Cemetery Assessment Appeal Stipulation Agreement. And what I'd like to do is move this. If there's a second, then I can give an explanation of what this is about. Any further comments or questions we can take from that point. But so I'll move to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval to execute a stipulation agreement to settle the assessment appeal by the owner, Philadelphia Catholic Cemeteries, and the operator, Mawr, of Calvary Cemetery in Villanova. I have a second. Thank you, Vice President Gavin. So let me give a brief explanation of what this is about and what it is that we are doing, because we are one of several municipalities that are involved in a somewhat unique piece of litigation. It's a matter which concerned an appeal as to both the valuation and the exempt status of cemetery in Lower Merion, and also cemeteries that are located in Cheltenham Township. The cemeteries are owned by the Philadelphia Catholic Cemeteries, LLC, and were leased then to Mawr, PA subsidiary LLC. They're all active burial sites, originally owned and operated by the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, and during that time, they were considered tax exempt as they were used purely for nonprofit religious purposes. So in 2014, the Archdiocese leased the cemeteries to Mawr, which is a nationwide for-profit cemetery operator. The lease term was for about 60 years, and the Archdiocese then sold the cemeteries to Philadelphia Catholic Cemeteries, subject to the lease. The argument then came that these properties were no longer tax exempt because they were being operated by a single-purpose, non-religious LLC, which was for-profit, and this resulted in the Board of Assessments declaring that the tax exempt status was lost and assessing the value of the cemeteries. Both the loss of the exempt status and the assessed value is what was challenged. And the difficulty there, among others, was how do you assess the value of a cemetery? If you go to assess the value of your own home, you might say, all right, my neighbor's property, which is very similar area, it's worth X, therefore my house would be worth X. Hard to do that with cemeteries. There aren't many of them for comparison purposes. So there was a question as to what the assessed value was, and basing on about 2015, which became the prime focal area of concern here, the fair market value was ranging from assessments from 20 million down to 3.2 million in the discrepancies. There also remained the issue about the tax exempt status. Were these indeed still tax exempt properties, and it was maintained by Philadelphia Catholic Cemeteries, that indeed it still was for religious purposes and there should be tax exemption. So with those issues up front on the table, a decision was made after appraisals came in to go ahead and settle this, and the properties will continue in a tax status but at a decreased value. And that will then mean, because of those appraisals, there has to be some refunds. Among the refunds, the township will need to refund about $261,000, where it would have been receiving more than the appropriate value. The county will refund about $215,000, and the school district in excess of $1.8 million. Going forward, we will continue to receive taxes, but at a rate of less than what we would have received under the old assessments, in excess of $42,000 less, and in 2025, we would have the right to go ahead and reassess if need be. So each of the other municipalities, being the county and the school district and Cheltenham Township, have all signed on to the settlement agreement. We would be the last ones to go ahead and approve the settlement agreement, which is before us. So with that overview, as indicated, we do have Mark Fisher here, is from our solicitor's office. If there are any questions that anybody has, we can answer them. Otherwise, we'll see if we want to move forward with this vote. So do any members of the board have any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, let's turn to members of the public. Any questions or comments? Anybody online? Yep. A shake of a head, no. So with that, I will then call the vote. All those who are in favor of the approval to execute the stipulated agreement, which has been presented as noted, please raise your hand indicating your approval of aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, it is so approved. So that brings us then to the next item on our agenda. And again, this will be something that, if approved, will go to our special board meeting later this evening. And again, we'll utilize the same protocol. I'll move it. If there's a second, then we can have the discussion. And I suspect we may have a little bit more discussion on this one than we did the last one. So this is to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners the adoption of resolutions initiating action in accord with the eminent domain code to acquire right-of-way and temporary construction easement for sidewalk construction along 1850 and 1851 Montgomery Avenue, adjacent to the new Black Rock Middle School, and authorizing the Township Secretary to advertise notice of intent to adopt an ordinance to amend the Code of Township of Lower Merion, Chapter A170, Sidewalk Ordinances, to provide for the construction and paving of sidewalks on the east side of Montgomery Avenue, the distance of 186 feet along the frontage of 1851 West Montgomery Ave, on the west side of Montgomery Ave, the distance of 544 feet along the frontage of 1840 and 1850 West Montgomery Ave, and 444 Claremont Road in Ward 6 of the township. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Gavin. So before we begin any of the further discussions on this, let me just first note that the members of the board take very seriously the concept of eminent domain. It is not something that we do frequently, and it is not something that we do lightly, but we find ourselves currently in a situation where we need to make some arrangements so that children will have foot passage to get to the new Black Rock Middle School. There have been some discussions with the neighbors or the residents who are involved in this, and I wish to emphasize as strongly as possible that we will continue to have discussions, and we will continue to try to go ahead and work out something amicably with them by agreement, that even if we move forward with this evening, that does not mean that we cannot reach an agreement with them at any point at time, and in fact, that's our preferred method of operation, to try to come to some type of arrangement that is mutually satisfactory to everybody, because there is a need for sidewalks, there is a need to be able to have that ability for the students to walk to school. So with that predicate, let me first turn it to members of the board who may have some questions or comments, and then go to the members of the public before we have a vote. Vice President Gavin.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim, and I think you're spot on. Eminent domain is not something we take lightly, and I know we've had discussions with a number of the residents, and this is not only about this eminent domain piece, but also ordaining the sidewalk in front of houses, that the sidewalk can be within the right-of-way, which we already have. So for a large portion of this sidewalk, it's already within the right-of-way for what is planned. This is something, as our Director of Public Works said earlier tonight, the right-of-way is for the public benefit. Since this project has started with the plan for the new middle school, one crucial element has been connecting the two neighboring communities, which is over 200 houses, to the middle school, so that the school children can walk to this middle school. It's an area of the township that does not have many sidewalks. It's an area of the township that needs sidewalks, especially connecting to a school. As we've started to talk about sidewalks more and more, we've talked about the need for sidewalks around our schools, around our parks, around our business districts. So this really is one of the highest priority areas of where sidewalks are needed. And as Commissioner Bernheim said, my hope and my intention is to negotiate with the homeowners that we do need to acquire some additional right-of-way so that we don't go through the eminent domain process. However, in order to have these sidewalks built for the opening of the school in the fall, this is a process that we need to go through. It is not meant in any way to be I don't know the right word, argumentative or attacking. It is meant as creating this process so that we can get this necessary right-of-way and get the sidewalk built for the school. So my hope is that we do have support for this evening, for both the advertising of the right-of-way acquisition as well as the ordaining of the sidewalk, and that we continue this process that we've been going through for months, if not years, as has been discussed with the school district from the day that they proposed this school in this location, so that when the school does open, we do have sidewalks and that the children have safe passage to the school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyways, Commissioner Grimes.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. And let me say first, Commissioner Bernheim, I very much appreciate your comments about the eminent domain process, which I agree with. And let me say I also agree with the need to have sidewalks at the new middle school, as Vice President Gavrin expressed. I'm certainly in support of that. Having said that, I am not going to support tonight's matter before us because I don't believe we should pursue eminent domain until the affected property owners have had an adequate and fair opportunity to try and negotiate an amicable settlement with us. And I'm not sure that, I'm not convinced that has happened yet. So for that reason alone, not because I oppose the sidewalks, I'm not going to support this resolution tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And anybody else who would like to make any comment? Yes, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Years ago, I didn't support this location for a new school, but the Board of Commissioners decided that this is where a new school should go, as did the school board. Eminent domain is taking property, but taking it with compensation based on appraisals. It's a very difficult tool to use, and in this case, it is just for right-of-way. It is actually not taking title to property, and discussions that are ongoing is a vital part of what's before us. What's also before us is the township paying for sidewalks, which we haven't done. We have ordained sidewalks, but that requires property owners to pay for sidewalks. Sidewalks for a new school are very important because we should have sidewalks for children to walk to school. We want walkable schools. Unfortunately, this school is in a very unwalkable area, and these sidewalks would be an improvement in that regard. But it is a brand-new school. It's a very, very difficult thing to go forward with this for those reasons, particularly for taking the big step of paying for sidewalks from the township capital budget. Something we haven't done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Is there anybody else who would like to make comment? All right, well, then before we call the vote, permit me one, I'm sorry.
Public
Okay.
comment. Yeah.
We did ask for that, and there was no one for public comment?
We didn't ask.
My sincere apologies. So is there any member of the public who wishes to speak?
Joseph Abramson, Balakinwood. I just wanted to say that, with regards to eminent domain, it is tricky because on the one hand, yeah, you're the government taking someone's property, but on the other hand, you're also the government responsible for people within the township. And I didn't have a car in Lower Merion until a couple of weeks ago. Until then, I was walking, biking, sometimes, closing my eyes while I had to do it because it's safer that way. And if we can do anything to make Lower Merion walkable, we shouldn't do that. But to answer, to echo or to add on to what Commissioner Grimes said, if you vote in favor of this taking tonight, tomorrow it's not going to be Lower Merion property and it's not going to be Lower Merion's right of way. There's still a whole long bureaucratic process that has to happen. But one thing that it will do is light a fire under people to start negotiating maybe quicker. It's showing them that Lower Merion is serious about putting a sidewalk. Maybe till now they were just stringing everyone along because, after all, it's negotiations. Once you start the process of eminent domain, it tells everyone involved that there is an end result. The end result is that Lower Merion is going to have the sidewalks. Whether you want to start negotiating now more thoroughly, or you want to just let the board of viewers and everything else take that into account, one way or another, there's going to be a sidewalk in front of the school now, and it might help the property owners realize that. I would also just say that I think we should do this more often. Maybe I don't know if we could ARP funds or whatever to buy more property or buy more right of way from other people, because there are streets where sidewalk ends in the middle and you have to walk into the street, and it's really dangerous. And if you want to encourage people to not use cars, you need to have more sidewalks in Lower Merion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amerson. Anybody else with any other comments? Anybody else online?
Yes.
Oh.
Hi, I am 1850 Montgomery Avenue, otherwise known as Julie Davidson. I don't really have any prepared remarks, but the remark that was just made got me a little heated. Andy put a note under my daughter's windshield in December of last year, letting us know, we had just closed on the property in September, we were still living elsewhere at the time, letting me know that a sidewalk was being planned. He invited me, which I attended virtually, to a meeting in his garage, which was March. At the end of that meeting, I asked the group, I said, guys, is this going to happen whether I want it to or not? And the answer was yes. So I made a decision at that point to try to have very fruitful conversations with Andy, with Joe Mastronardo, with Diana Mancini, with anybody and everybody who would talk with me so we would not have to get to this point. I came in March. Candidly, I wasn't planning on being here, but my daughter had my first grandchild 2 months early, so I flew out. It was on March 14th. I called Andy up and I said, I'm on the right coast to try to have a conversation with you. So I drove down 4 days later, met with everybody, and I said, you know, what trees do you need to take out? Because there's a lot, and they're very old trees, and they're very tall trees, and it's a property that gets a lot of now noise, and you know, trucks aren't blocked like they used to be before the school district took down a lot of trees. And I said, let's tag the trees. Let's figure out what we can move. Let's figure out and try to save some money. Let's, help me understand what needs to happen. In that meeting, I said, guys, nothing can happen until things are appraised. We have to get an appraisal. That was in March. Now, I've been asking questions on a pretty regular basis of Joe and of Andy. I said, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I don't want this to get, to a point where we are exactly right now. Andy, do you want to back me up on anything and everything I've just said?
Please, well, I'll tell you what, if you can finish your comments, and then members of the board, including Vice President Gavin, will have an opportunity to respond.
Sure.
All right? Thank you.
So this basically was an unplanned comment associated with the comment that was made prior. We have tried really hard. We're not stringing anybody along. We are trying to get this done. What I did plan on saying is, I think the language of the law is such that it says folks should be made whole. If there is a taking, there should be a giving back, either exactly the same thing or some sort of monetary, compensation. In my particular property, that has 4 elements. The element is, if you're going to be taking my land, there needs to be compensation associated with the appraisal of the land. There are very large trees that are going to have to be cut down. They need to be put back up, and there is a source to be able to do it. And if you're not willing to do it, please give me the money so I can try to shield my house from the noise and the view of the cars coming up and down the street. There is the fact that I had to retain an attorney, and I hadn't planned on doing that because this is, an eminent domain thing, and I probably spent more money on attorneys since I bought this house than I've never spent any money on attorneys, but now I'm spending lots of money on attorneys. The last thing is, I would define being made whole as if I've said this before, sorry, I'm a little disjointed here. not being left in a worse position than when we started. And what's happening is there's going to be a sidewalk. I understand there's going to be a sidewalk. Eventually, whether it's now or later, it's going to be a sidewalk. That sidewalk is somewhere between 250 to 300 feet in front of my house. It's 5 feet wide. When it snows, we are now responsible for getting rid of all that snow, and it's a lot of snow. And I'm 63 years old, my husband is 74. There's going to be a cost associated on an ongoing basis of making sure that the sidewalk is safe for the kids to walk. I don't want somebody slipping and falling into the street. So those are what I consider to be elements of not being left in a worse position than when we started. With that, would be more than happy to listen to what anybody has to say.
All right, Ms. Davidson, thank you. I'm going to let Vice President Gavin respond because I'm sure he wants to, but I'm just going to point out every single item that you have referenced is something that we've all considered and are taking it under consideration. But Vice President Gavin, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Before I respond, I'd like if our township manager can, or our solicitor can talk about the eminent domain process, because as Mr. Abramson said, this is just, and let me stop for a second. Ms. Davidson, you're absolutely right. You have not, and none of the homeowners have been stringing the township along. That has not been what has happened in this situation. It has gone longer than it has, and if anything, it's because of the township. It is not because of the homeowners. But I want to make sure that everyone understands the process of eminent domain and what the timing means. And it's not a process that means the sidewalk would not go in for a year and a half. Even if there's contention over what the actual compensation would be. So whether it's the manager or solicitor, kind of walking through what that process would look like.
Sure. So what's before the board tonight is, I guess you could call step one of the process, even though there's been discussions prior. Step one of the process is a resolution to authorize the taking of land for whatever the public purpose is here for purposes of right-of-way to install a sidewalk. Once that occurs, the township then has to file what's called a declaration of taking, which is filed with the Court of Common Pleas of Montgomery County, and that essentially takes the property that is the subject of the authorizing resolution and the declaration of taking. At the same time, there's notices filed with the county recorder of deeds to give notice that the land is now, the title to the right-of-way in this case, is now the property of the township, and then also notice is given to whoever the condemnee, the property owner, is, all at that same time as the time of the declaration of taking. After that time period, after that's all filed, there's a time period within which the property owner gets to respond if they choose to the declaration of taking. It's a 30-day period, and then after that period expires is when the township would offer the just compensation that they estimate for whatever the property is that's being taken. So that all can happen. The time period from the resolution, which would be before the board tonight, until the declaration of taking can vary. It can go from a very short period of a day, or it could go for a year. The code allows up to a year. So, and the code also allows at any point in the process for there to continue to be negotiations with the property owner, and for there to be an agreement with the property owner at any time during the process.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
And the reason I wanted you to do that was to talk about what you said at the very end, that there is time to do that negotiation with the homeowners, because that's the goal here. That's our goal, that's my goal. I know that's the township's goal. It hasn't gone exactly as I had wanted it to go, and as we've discussed, and I do want to thank you, Julie, for all of the conversations and the back and forth that we've had over the months since December and since March, because as you've said, we've had a number of conversations. You've been very amenable to working with the township and figuring out the way to do this. This sidewalk is important. We are going to be putting in this sidewalk. It's something that is crucial. It's something that has been in our CIP, in our capital improvement plan, for the last 3 years at least. It's something that every single member of this board has said is important in connection with this new school. It's just a question of how we do it, and I hope, I can speak for this board when I say we are committed to doing right and to making you whole and to getting this sidewalk, as Mr. Abramson said, to make it a safe passage for the kids to get to the school. So it's, there's work ahead of us, but this is, I believe, a necessary step in getting there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes. President Sina.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. I just wanted to address something that Mr. Abramson said, because he encouraged us to acquire more right-of-way in the township and build more sidewalks. And one of the things I've had the pleasure for doing for way too long is to chair our ad hoc sidewalk committee, along with some of my fellow board members, to think about building out the sidewalk network. And I think the thing that's interesting is that really throughout the township, in most places, the right-of-way actually exists. Right? So the right-of-way is already there. There is no sidewalk, either because one was never put in back in the day, or there are trees in the way, or there are steep slopes. It's an expensive location to put a sidewalk in, but it's not for the lack of right-of-way. Right? This is fairly unusual in the township in that the extra right-of-way is needed for having a place to legally put the sidewalk here, and that's kind of puts us where we are. I will say that even within the context of all the locations in the township that we've been studying for sidewalks, like this location, like under any of our criteria, would like hit the top of the list, right? So the criteria, the things that we're looking at, are they close to schools? Does it connect places with lots of people going to that destination? Is it unsafe? Right now, there's an intersection with lights, a crosswalk to nowhere. Right, it is a enormous problem without a sidewalk, in my opinion. I think we really need a sidewalk in this location. I think we've recognized that for a while, which is why it's been the CIP. In response to the other residents, thank you, and thank you to you both, to you and your neighbors for working constructively with the township on it. I think we found ourselves in a place with, just as a matter of timing with school starting, we found ourselves needing to do things in parallel, right? And that kind of just puts us in this position. It's not in any, I think certainly Andy spoke for me as well, which is, the township's intent, and I think certainly the law requires a fair compensation, right? And I think that's, how these things go. So really, from my perspective, this becomes just a matter of legal expediency to keep things moving along more than anything else. I don't think, from my perspective, it materially changes any of the other issues. Anyway, thank you for all the comments that we had tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, President Sinai, for summing that up so well. Anybody else with any other comments from members of the board? All right. With that, I think it would be appropriate then to go ahead and call the vote. Again, this is to consider for a recommendation of the board for the adoption of the resolution in accord with the eminent domain code as previously noted. So with that, I will ask all those in favor to raise your hand indicating aye. Any opposed? Seeing two. All right, this it does pass, and it still goes on to our special board meeting. It's all right if that proceeds then with the consent on the next board meeting?
It is.
Two nods of a yes. So with that, President Sinai, that does conclude the business of the Legal Affairs Committee for this evening.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bernheim. And with that, we turn to the Special Board of Commissioners meeting. And so I will call to order the July 6, 2022 special meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Whalen have asked to be excused, and Mr. Gavin has stepped out of the room. Mr. Bernheim.
Present.
Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Mr. Courtney.
Present.
Mr. Grimes.
Here.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Here.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. McComb.
Here.
Mr. McKeon.
Here.
Ms. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Zeloff.
Here.
Mr. Sinai.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. So this is the section of our meeting where members of the public may address the board on any agenda items. The agenda items on the board tonight are on our consent calendar. They're the sidewalk bid that we discussed in the Finance Committee. They're the Wyndon parking that we discussed in the Police Committee. They are the Old Monk Road issue that we discussed in Public Works, in the Calvary Cemetery, and the Black Rock sidewalks issue that we just discussed in Legal Affairs. Does any member of the public wish to comment on any of these agenda items? Jody, anyone online?
No one online.
Okay, seeing none. These are all on the consent calendar. Would anyone like to remove any items from the consent calendar? All right, seeing none. I move that we approve the consent calendar, which includes items that I just described. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill. Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard. Oh, he's still, sorry. Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
Aye.
Mr. Zello.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The consent calendar is duly adopted.
Hey, thank you, Madam Secretary. I guess that concludes the business of the Board of Commissioners meeting for this evening, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good comments.
This is another